Jim, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to speak to you because one, you're a wealth of knowledge, but two, I love your energy. I found you on social media, and every single post is so energetic, which is very kind of almost funny in a way because what you're talking about, a lot of people wouldn't assign with high energy, like real estate investing. And usually people are like, oh, that's kind of dull. But I love the fact that you bring it every single time. So thank you so much for giving me some of your time. I can't wait to pick your brain a bit here.
Well, thanks, Ben. I know you reached out to me, so I really appreciate it. And it's funny you mentioned the energy because sometimes when I used to work in the corporate world
Yep.
and people talk to me, and sometimes we would talk about investing, but most of the times it'd be the corporate stuff. Because when you talk about investing and you transition from like what you're doing from day to day, you like blow up. It's like it's a different person. And I'm
Yeah.
like, really? I don't even notice. So it's good. It's interesting you mentioned that.
That's awesome. See, and clearly you're very passionate about what you do, and we're gonna dive a little bit deeper into that in a bit there. But so I like to start off all these conversations just trying to get a better understanding as to where it all began. So for Jim, like where were you? Where did you grow up? What was your early childhood like? Like what was the foundation that brought you to where you are today?
That's a fantastic question. A lot of the stuff came from when I was in Canada. My parents were immigrants here. They came to Montreal and then eventually to Toronto. They had no support whatsoever. There was no siblings around or parents around. They came here on their own. I was the first generation born here. So, as you can imagine, two things stood out for me. Number one, we were very low uh, middle class at best, and every dollar had to be conserved. And number two was that my parents really stressed education because that was the path that they knew to escape the middle class or at least maintain the middle class. So education and saving a dollar was extremely powerful, but also detrimental too. Because as you may have heard from your other guests, when you're born with a scarcity mindset, it could
Mm,
hinder you. Also, it could help you. So it's a double-edged sword. It's not always great to grow up thinking that money is scarce, resources are scarce. You go into this conservative fight or flight mode, and it could hinder your growth. So I had that. And what happened was because my parents focused on education so much for all of elementary, all of junior high, and most of high school, they were focusing on the marks. My overall average, had to be extremely high. And they would push me all the time. And when you're younger, I heard this saying from another parent. They said, kids love school until they hit about 10 years old. Then they wonder, what the hell is this game? So,
yeah.
so that's what, so what happened to me was at 10, I was grinding and then I hit the honor roll, which was 80. And my parents were never satisfied, never. So they were always, if I got a 70, why isn't it 80? If I got an 80, why isn't it 90? Like,
Mm,
unless you got 100, it was, why didn't you? And I peaked, I think, somewhere in high school, grade 11 or 12. I think right now there's only 12, but back then we had 13,
yep.
grade 13. But I peaked with like a 93% average or 94. And I said, I eventually said to my parents, I said, what are we doing? Like, what am I doing this for? Like, because every time I get a certain mark, I get on the honor roll, they plaster my name on a little billboard in front of the school, and then I get a pat on the back and they say, do it again, do it again. And I'm like, what is this? Like, why am I doing this? Like, what is the purpose? So my parents sat me down and I was like, oh, great. They're finally going to tell me, like, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing or why I'm doing this.
Yeah, yeah.
And then my
Absolutely.
parents sat me down and he says, the reason why we want you to do so well is that so you can get accepted into the advanced program. I don't know if they have that now, but in high school, every course had an advanced level, a general level, and a basic level.
Okay.
And they always wanted me to go into the advanced physics, the advanced math, the advanced English. I was like, okay, that's great. So now what? Because, well, if you do well at those courses, you get to go to the high school of your choice. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. And then what? Well, then you get to go to the university of your choice. And I'm like, this is a pattern here.
Yeah.
Okay, get to the end. Well, then you get a job at a blue chip company, like tier one company. Very difficult to get in unless you have a university degree, a top tier degree. And then you can start making money. And then you will be financially independent. And I was like, so what you're telling me is that after 10 more years, at least 10 more years of grinding, I'll be able to make some money. Like, that's really what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom said, yeah, that's the thing. And I didn't want to grind for another 10 years. Honestly, I was like, no, that's not. I was like, how about this? Why don't we make a deal? Why don't we learn about money now? And then we can just skip all that. And then we don't have to follow this plan, because this plan sounds really hard for me anyway. Like, it doesn't sound hard for you, but it's pretty hard for me. And my parents just said, it doesn't work that way. And that was the end of the conversation. And I don't blame them for that, because I respect them for what they did for me. They provided food, education, shelter, but they couldn't provide anything more beyond that. They probably weren't able to tell me how to do that. So that's why they cut off the conversation. It wasn't because they wanted to sort of to cut me off or to tell me that it can't be done. They just said they just said indirectly they didn't know how to do it.
Okay.
So that was 14 years old. And I was thinking, after my mom said that, I said, first, like, let's cut to the chase. And number two is like, that can't be right. The pattern can't be right. This method that they're telling me can't be right, because number one, I've seen all my friends, all 2,000 students. I know some of their parents. They're my parents' peers. I see my parents' relatives, my relative. No one was financially free. So, and they all followed this path. Everyone followed this path, and I had not met anyone who was financially free. So this path must be wrong, because if this path was correct, I would at least meet a few people who were like, yeah, I followed the path. I made a ton of investments or money. I didn't know about investments. I made a ton of money, and I don't need to work anymore. I'm financially free. I met nobody like that. Nobody was like that. Everybody who followed this path were worried about how to pay their bills, how to pay their mortgage, how to pay their groceries, how to pay their rent. Anxiety about money was rampant. So I was like, well, I don't see this ending the way my parents say it's going to end. And number two, and this is teenage logic, and I love teenagers because they just give you the real deal. Like, they could smell bullshit in 5 seconds, and I love it. I love teenagers, because when you work in the corporate environment, I don't know how long you've been in a corporate environment, you start listening to a lot of BS, a lot of bullshit, a lot of like corporate speak. And then eventually you start thinking that's normal. So then you start using it. And then eventually you start talking, and you don't even know you're throwing bullshit around. It just sounds like corporate speak. But if you spit it back to a teenager, they're like, what the hell's that? Like, that's like so not authentic. Like, that's like so bullshit, right? So sorry, I don't know if I can say that.
No, you're good. You're good.
So when I was a 14-year-old, I said, that can't be the path. And number two, I said, there must be somebody in the history of mankind, because I'm pretty sure humans didn't fall on this planet like just 5 years ago or 10 years. I'm sure somewhere in the history of mankind, someone achieved financial independence, and they wrote it down. They wrote down the method. It's somewhere. So if it's written down, it's probably in the library or in the bookstore. That's where I need to go. I need to go there. And that started my journey about reading everything. And unfortunately, there was no one book.
Yeah.
There was like dozens. And it was just a long journey. That's how it all started. It just started with wanting to stop grinding at school and not end up as that 50 or 60-year-old saying, hey, I was chasing that carrot for 50 years. Where is it? Yeah. It's not here. So that was where it started.
Okay, well, that was a great answer to that question. That's probably one of the better ones I've received, so that's awesome. And the first thing I have is, where did that approach come from, where you were questioning the system? Because so many people just go along with it because they see everyone else doing it, right? It's groupthink. They're just like, okay, this is what we're supposed to do. So where was that in you, where you thought, okay, this doesn't add up?
When you're young, a lot of times in an immigrant family, you just do whatever your parents say. There was no questioning.
Yeah.
So that was probably odd for me to question it. Number one, you would never go to your parents, typically in my culture, where they say you need to study and get this mark, and say, why? Like, you just do it, right? You're like, why would I do that? That sounds dumb. But I had done it for a good part of 10 years. And so I wanted to know where this was going. It was I think it's an obvious thing. If you get into a car and you start driving,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first question is, where are you going? Where are we going? I mean, are we going to the beach? Are we going to the doctor? I mean, they're both two different things. Like, I want to know where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't like the grinding. At first, it was a game. It was like, oh, if I get, 70% in phys ed because I'm useless, I need to get 90% in math to average it out to 80. You're doing all these little calculations, and it's a fun little game. But after a while, you do the game 1 semester, 2 semesters, 10 semesters, 12. So you're like, what the heck? What is this? Like, okay, so where am I going? Where is
Where does
this
it
taking
end?
me?
Yeah.
And so when my parents told me there was an end, which was money, I was like, that's great.
You can
Now
reverse
that I know
engineer.
where we're going,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, correct. You reverse engineer. Now that I know where I'm going, I can start learning about that
That's awesome.
instead of doing this, because this is just sort of a proxy as far as they're describing it to me.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of
Right?
sense. So then when you said that you were looking to seek out this information for yourself and you started in the library, what were the first few books of those dozens or more that you started to read? Like, what were the
Wow.
first few ones?
So the library had all this free material, and it was fantastic. It had books about bonds, stocks. It had the biggest newspapers that would cost at that time. It was like $2 a copy for the New York Times. It was like $5 a copy for Barron's, but it was all free.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to read this stuff. And what I found was, like, I didn't understand any of it. Like, I knew how to read. Like, I was a prolific reader. I did well in English in high school, but it was English, but I was reading it, but it made no sense to me. It was talking about commodities and futures and interest rates and markets. And I was like, this is like a different language. It's not something I understand. And so I'm going to put this off to the side. And my first criteria for an investment book can't be what's the most prestigious. It has to be something I understand, because I don't understand anything. So the first book I actually picked up and I understood was Peter Lynch's One Up on Wall Street and Beating the Street. He spoke in very plain English. It was exactly how English was taught in high school. They're just speaking very plainly. There was no heavy math,
Mm-hmm.
no heavy terminology, and no acronyms.
Okay.
So that's where I started. In the library, I couldn't find stuff that I could understand. So the bookstore had that type of stuff. And it made sense, because the bookstore sells to the masses. If the masses don't understand what they're reading, they're not going to buy it.
They won't buy it, yeah.
So, right. So the best place was the bookstore. The bookstore had a ton of books that I could understand. And then I circled back later in university to read those journals and the newspapers that I didn't understand before, with a stronger base. So that's how it started with the reading.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. And so when you're doing all this, so this is all external beyond school. So you said you wanted to do this to avoid kind of just going through the plan. But from the sounds of it, so you still went to university. How did you pick what program to do, like where to invest your time when you went to university?
So the story is, I peaked at probably like a 94% grade average for everything. But once I found out that there were actually people who made money outside of this path, my grades started to slip.
Okay.
So it went from like 94, then 91, then 90, 90, and then like 88. 88, I got into university. How I picked was, my parents just wanted something with a high value in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So engineering was high value, medicine was high value, but it was like 4 years plus. And I was like, no, thank you. That's okay. I'm not even sure I can do it with my motivation. My motivation was almost dead at that point.
Yep.
So I got into university for engineering at the University of Toronto, and my marks kept going down because I kept not reading the engineering books. These are $100 engineering books teaching me what I felt was useless information, completely irrelevant books about thermodynamics, level 3 calculus, engineering graphic. It was just like nuclear processes. I was like, what is this? Like, how am I going to make any money with a book about nuclear processes in 2 years? Like, I can't. And I failed. Second year, I failed out. And I was shocked, because I've never failed before.
Yeah.
Following the plan, you never fail. My parents were super upset, like crazy upset. My mom started bawling. I've never seen my mom cry before. I've seen her cry twice. That was the first time.
Wow.
And she was like bawling, how we came to this country, and we want you to have a good, solid foundation. And she was already indoctrinated, and I didn't want to convince her that, that's not going to go anywhere. So I said, fine. I'll set up a study plan where I skate by with like a 75 average, and I'll get that paper that you really want. So I did that. 2 years later, skated through, got the paper, threw it in the corner. I moved on. Like, it's just so that they were happy that I had the diploma and they could tell their friends.
Okay, so you appeased them by getting the diploma, and then we're still continuing on your path while going through that.
That's right. So that was in the mid 90s when the internet started, email started, everything. And I convinced my friends. I said, hey, it'd be great. We should start an internet company. Because everyone's starting one.
Exactly.
Everyone's starting. And long story short, we started a company. It was 4 of us. We started making a lot of money because a lot of big companies, publishers, financial institutions, blue chip companies just wanted to get on the internet. And it wasn't anything more complicated than we want to post press releases.
Yeah.
And we want to create a back end where our technology challenged employers can go through a workflow of a press release, get it audited by an editor, get it audited by legal, by HR, and some process, and then push it to the internet. That's a process. It's a very simple process. It has like X number of stages, and it goes public.
Okay.
And you build something, and we built stuff like that, made a ton of money. I had like tens of thousands of stock options, and then in the dot-com crash, I was wiped out.
Wow. Okay. So how long did that company last for? So what was so how long did that run for? What was the runway with that company?
6 years. We did it. We went from 4 people to 400. 400 people. Wow. We had $50 million in the bank. We had huge contracts with Prentice Hall. We had huge contracts with Deutsche Bank, Massachusetts Mutual Insurance Company, the National Institutes of Health. We did work on huge projects, and it all came crashing down. The options became worthless. We got bought, so I wasn't in control after a few years. After a few years, we got bought. I think when we were at maybe 50 people, we got taken over. My 4 people got taken over and then merged, and then they kept going on to 400 people. They started adding marketing, audio, visual, technology, architecture, database. It was a whole bit, and then everything blew up. And the amazing thing, and one of the biggest lessons that's very difficult to learn, and I learned it early. Thank goodness I started reading when I was 14, because I remember Warren Buffett was saying, be fearful when others are greedy. And at the time, I was working in tech when tech was going ballistic, and I was like the only person out of all my engineers who did not even invest in a tech share. Okay. I did not buy one tech issue. I was too scared because of what Warren Buffett said. And I bought a utility that paid 8% interest, like a utility. I bought a company called King World Productions that syndicates shows like Wheel of Fortune, the Oprah Winfrey Show, etc. back in the day. And they just made money from syndication and producing. And they were valued at $1.5 billion, but they had $1 billion in cash. So I was very safe. Like I wanted companies that had a huge amount of real estate or cash to back up their share price. I didn't want to bet on revenue going forward.
Yeah.
That's right. So, and then when the bottom dropped out of the tech market, I didn't get taken with them. So thank God for that. But it was based on the reading that came to be useful later.
Okay. And so then after this happens, obviously that changes the dynamic of everything. So what was the next move in terms of like your investing career as well as like your professional career?
At that time, I started investing in stocks and real estate. So I bought Berkshire Hathaway because I really admired Warren Buffett. Index funds weren't on the radar, surprisingly. Back in the 90s, Canadian mutual funds were charging 2.5% MERs a year. That was typical. You don't get these 0.04s and 0.5s and stuff like that today, but it was mutual funds. So I was in a mutual fund, but I eventually shifted that off to Berkshire Hathaway and King World Productions and this utility. And then I also bought property in Toronto. Back in the day, Toronto real estate was very weird. So back then, if you understand Toronto, downtown by the financial district generally costs more than the suburbs, say North York.
Okay.
So downtown might be $1,500 a square foot today, and Midtown or suburbia would be $700, $800 a square foot. It'd be double or half, depending on how you want to look at it. Back then, they were the same. The price you would buy for a 2-bedroom condo downtown would be the same price as a 2-bedroom condo in North York. So I was thinking, like, looking at this, and I went through the last Toronto housing crash, which was actually in the late 80s. People don't remember this because they probably weren't born, but the housing market was cut in half during my time in university.
Wow.
So I came out of that process thinking, number one, it's probably a good time to buy because it's shortly after the crash. And number two, there's something wrong because I don't think downtown should be the same price as suburbia.
Mm-hmm. So
since I don't know which one is right, like I don't know if the suburbia condo is overvalued or the downtown condo is undervalued, I'll buy both of them.
Okay.
So I bought both of them. And then the prices started to separate. And at that point, I got hooked on real estate in reality. But I did liquidate that because there was no way my rent to purchase price was sufficient to make any sense of the investment. And the US market was going through their crisis. And I would rather have US dollars and US assets. That's my goal was always the US. I'm very pro-US, born and raised in Canada, love the country, love where I grew up, but American dollars is king everywhere, anytime.
Yeah. Okay. Then we share that opinion wholeheartedly. So that's very interesting. So when you started to shift from the assets and the real estate that you had in Canada and started thinking about going to the States, how did you approach that?
That's very interesting. I was working at the time at a large multinational company, and the market went down. It went down really hard. It was so funny. One of my friends works on not Wall Street, Bay Street. And he's a typical high earner, high spender. So he has, not as much as he would normally have. He has a lot of money, but he spends like a lot too. He does the whole weekend vacations to Europe and stuff like that.
Wow.
So I sit down with him for lunch periodically. Great guy, hilarious. He's like, he has no filter. And so we start talking. He's like, bro, look at Vegas. I'm like, what's going on in Vegas? He's like, the houses there are like free. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, my parents, they're retired. I'm like, yeah, I know. They're out in BC. He's like, yeah, they're looking for like a retirement home, like a snowbird home in Vegas because they're cheap. I go, yeah, I heard about the news. Like the credit crisis is destroying all the prices around homes, 5 million homeless, like all that stuff. Is it really that bad? He's like, it's really bad. He's like, I'm going to go down to Vegas and check it out myself. So I went home and I looked at the stuff and I started looking. I said, this is a real big opportunity. Like it's a massive opportunity. It's like once in a lifetime. I was reading all the articles and people were saying, we've never seen this since the Depression. Prices are down like 40, 50, sometimes 70%.
Jeez.
Homes were the same prices as SUVs. So I literally said, I need to get in on this, because number one, the Canadian dollar was at parity, was stronger than the US dollar, stronger. It was 1.1 American dollars. The Canadian dollar was stronger. And I'm someone who's so pro-America that during the 90s, when the Canadian dollars was worth 66 cents, I still bought US stock. Like that's how dedicated I was to having US dollars.
Okay.
Right. So people now who are saying like, it's 73 cents, it's so expensive. Like I was buying when it was 66 cents.
Wow.
So I was so convinced that in my future, I wanted a flow of American dollars. And so I went down there, and this sounds so stupid. They said, how did you start investing in real estate? I literally took Google and I said, Canadian looking for real estate in Phoenix. And then the first name that popped up that wasn't an ad, I picked up the phone and I called him and I talked to a guy named Ron, and he's like, yeah, I can help you buy property. I'm like, yeah, you're the guy. Perfect. You're going to help me. That's my criteria. The criteria is like, I need a guy to help me find property. And he said, great, I'll put you on something called Flex MLS. You will see all the properties hit your feed as soon as they come up for sale. He logs me in and he leaves me alone. That night, I didn't get any sleep. I pulled up not a dozen or 2 dozen. I pulled up thousands of properties were being flooded into my screen because people just wanted to get out.
Get rid of them. Mm.
They just like, we need to sell now. Like there was no one buying. Nobody was buying. And I talked to Ron the next day and I said, how many people are you working with? Because I need someone who's dedicated. He's like, dude, nobody's working with me. You're like my third client. Like, no, they've all left. He's like, I have you and this other guy in Minnesota, and that's it. And I said, like, anybody else in my age looking? He's like, nobody in their 30s is looking. Nobody. It's like, I don't even know why you're looking. He's
Yeah,
like,
what are you doing wrong?
What are you doing here? And I said, listen, let me get back to you. I'm going to go through your list. What I did was I went to the city. Every large metropolis has a map of their crime statistics, property and violent. I cared more about violent crime because if I knew I needed a property manager, I didn't want them to have any problems when managing my property. So I looked at the map and I started mapping out. It showed me where all the high crime incidents were. Then I took the huge listing of MLS listings and I started mapping them all on the zip codes. So I grouped them into zip codes because there's just too many, like zip code, zip code, zip code. And then I started looking at the zip codes and I would be like, okay, this zip code is completely out. If I see this zip code, not investing there. So then I could help narrow down the 1,000 down to like 500. Then I would narrow down like the moderate crime stuff. So that took me down to like maybe 100 out of every 1,000. Out of the 100, I would go through and I would look for, I want at least two bathrooms. I needed 2 bathrooms. I wanted people to like, not be like, hey, get out of the bathroom. Right. So, and I want at least 2 bedrooms, right? Or more. And then that listed down even further. Then I just separated by price. I just separated by price because at that point, a 3-bed, 2-bath in Phoenix and a 2-bed, 2-bath by Phoenix, the prices were like, let's give you an idea. A 1-bedroom condo in downtown Phoenix was 20 grand, 20 grand. It was 20 grand. And I was like, God damn, that's cheaper than the Honda Civic. Like, that's ridiculous.
Honestly.
And usually when you have that price in normal market, you're thinking that's like a war zone. It's some crime ridden, drug infested, but this was just because the market came down. It was a golf course community with a pool and a nice 18-hole golf course with 1-bedroom condos right next to it for 20 grand. Wow. 2-bedroom condos for 35 grand. And I could have went for 1-bedroom condos, but for some reason, I thought that they would be hard to rent out. You know, I would cut myself off from families and stuff like that. It would only be for like single bachelors or you know, stuff like that. So I went to the 2 bedrooms and focused there. And then I just had Ron, my agent, just visit them. I'll just go visit them. And he would visit and he would just be like, I don't like this or I don't like that. He would be my boots on the ground.
Yeah.
I like it. I don't like it. And he would tell me what he liked and didn't like. And then we would just start writing offers. And back then there was no e-signing. It was emailing large PDFs, sign it, scan it, mail it back. I was killing trees by the truckload, like every week, like just sending stuff back. And we just started buying. And then I just needed more money. So I liquidated my home.
Really?
I liquidated my home. I moved back to my original 1-bedroom condo just so that I could, because Toronto real estate had gone up a lot.
Yeah.
Right. So I was talking to my wife. I said, this is a great opportunity. Like we should get rid of our home and buy these rentals. Like it's a once in a lifetime. It'll never be $1.1 US and it'll never be 20 grand condos, like ever.
No.
So we just sold our primary residence. I moved back to my original condo. So we were like stuck in this 1-bedroom and we were just picking up property and you couldn't get debt. Like people say, why don't you go get debt? He goes, it was called a credit crisis for a reason.
Yeah.
There was no credit. There wasn't like it's not, the banks were burned, but by lending money to buy homes. And then you want to go to a bank and say, hey, can you lend me money to buy a home? They're like, get out of here. Get lost. That way.
Yeah.
So that's when it all started. And I started buying them as fast as I could.
So how many did you buy over this time?
So my goal was very modest. And this is one thing that investors need to know. Whatever goal you have in your head, it's going to be too low.
Okay.
Whatever goal you have, you're thinking of now that you want to achieve is too low. My goal was very simple. I didn't want to be the richest person in the world or on like any kind of list or be recognized. I just wanted to replace my household income.
Yeah.
So I didn't need to get a job. I need to work.
Yeah.
If I replace my entire household income, there's no need to work. Working becomes optional.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I knew my household income. I have a budget. And I said, I need to hit this number. So I kept buying until I hit that number. And it was a little less than 20 properties. And once I hit the number, I took my foot off the gas. That was a mistake. Like, it would have been better if I kept going and I bought 30 or 40 of them. So I took my foot off the gas. I replaced my household income. And then, as you can imagine, your desire for working really goes like the crapper.
Oh God, yeah, for sure.
So then, but anyway, like that was a great adventure. I had to go through tax lessons, property management lessons, tenant turnover lessons, all the lessons that I could afford to do now because I was buying at so low price.
Yes.
One of my favorite stories is my agent gave me a deal. I didn't find it. I spent hours on the MLS and I threw him deals, but he found me a deal. He was like, I found this for you. I'm like, what is this? This is a detached house. He's like, yeah, it's a detached house, but it's in a really nice neighborhood. It's called Tolleson. It's a very nice 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's like 1,500 square foot. It's like a starter house. I'm like, okay, well, how much is it? Because I'm buying like 40 grand condos.
Yeah.
50 grand. And I'm like, 50 grand for a detached house?
Give it to me.
What's the catch? Like, what? He's like, well, it's owned by the bank. It's not a short sale. I was buying only short sales. Okay. Only short sales up until that point. If you need to talk about that, we can. Mm-hmm. This was owned by the bank. So it's called real estate owned. Okay. What that means was that the owner foreclosed. The bank took it, tried to put it on auction to get any money back. No one showed up at the auction.
Oh, wow.
So then no one showed up at the auction at whatever price they put. So then they took it, they took ownership of it, and then they listed it for 50 grand. Like, you know, the auction price wasn't hit at 70, maybe someone will buy it at 50. And this isn't just one property. They have thousands of them on their books. So what my agent explained to me was that you write up the offer, you throw it into the black hole known as the bank, and they'll get back to you whenever they get back to you. Because you have to understand, they're chewing on tens of thousands of these, okay? Yeah. So you don't know when they're going to get back to you. But we keep going, buying our short sales. And when they get back to you, probably with a yes, because no one's down here, you'll just get the house for 50 grand. And then I kept doing my short sales. And then 8 months later, the bank says, you're approved, 50 grand, you can have the house, take it. Get it off, get out of here, take it. And I was like, wow, that's great. And I already had a process in place. I told my agent to get the keys, locker key, mail key, door key, garage key, take the keys, go to my property manager, drop it off, they'll handle it from there. Then I told my property manager, get it rented out, blah, 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 blah. They did everything remotely. I was just here like directing things from Toronto.
That's crazy to me because like that's a lot more common today to be handling all this remotely. But when you were doing this all, like that was, I would say that's very much not the norm. So how did you go about figuring all that out logistically?
You have to understand, as an investor, certain things, when the price is too high, you can't afford to do certain things. Okay. Because the price was so low and the cash flow was so insane, you could afford to make mistakes, like pretty significant ones. Like if one condo that only cost you 40 grand or 35 grand, it's not going to hurt you if you make a few mistakes. I remember, for example, my broker was very tentative about saying, hey, I need to charge some commission because I need to make some money. And I said, that's fine. Like, I think that's fair. Like, how much commission do you want? It's like, well, about $500 per house. I was like, frig, I can't buy a house in Toronto for $500 commission. Yeah, a deal. Yeah, that's fine. Right. So you can make mistakes. So at the time I knew I can't take care of these properties. It's illegal for a Canadian to take care of rentals in the States. It's actually illegal because I am a foreign alien and you need to give the job to an American. I don't have a visa and I'm not going to get a visa every time I go there to change a filter.
Yeah, fair.
So you have to pay for a property manager. But because you're making so much money, it's easy to pay for a property manager. And number two, when you have a lot of units, the price of property management goes down.
Yeah.
And property managers are like, yeah, we're happy to take your property. So it was very obvious to me that if my agent has the keys, if they give it to my property manager, I just talk to the person there and say, my account manager at the company, get it leased out, get the tenant set up, just send me the lease. And if they're approved by me and by yourself, we're good to go and we'll move on.
Okay. So you, after buying all of these properties in Vegas, or was it
Phoenix.
Phoenix? Okay.
Yeah.
So after buying all of these, at this point, did you quit your corporate job and just go full on in terms of your real estate portfolio, or what was the transition for that?
I decided to keep working just because it was like I was getting paid double.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
I guess that's true. You're eating on both ends.
yeah. So at the beginning, you're like, I'm working an hour, but getting paid double.
Mm-hmm.
So, that everything's new at the beginning. It's exciting. So I'm like, wow, it's great. Like, I'm getting, it's like, this is how I viewed it. In my old job, I used to get a bonus, right? You get a bonus at the end of the year. I was thinking every house I pick up is like a bonus. I'm like picking up a bonus check every time I buy a house.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not getting one bonus a year. I'm getting as many bonuses as many houses I can pick up. So if I pick up 5 houses this year, I get 5 bonuses.
That's crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's how I viewed it. So I kept working, and then I transitioned. So what happened was the prices started shooting up, and eventually it made no sense for me to find the deals because I couldn't. The people who are local will always be able to find deals faster than you.
Yeah.
So for me, being remote, the only way I was able to find deals was when there was so many in the market that the local people couldn't eat them all anyway.
Okay.
So they were like, we'll take as much as we can, but we can't take them all. So there was room for me. But eventually the prices got so high that it was like, you have to be on the ground to know where the deal was. And that's not a real estate agent. A real estate agent is just buying and selling homes. These are the people who actually show up at the auction house, people who show up at the foreclosures. So that was not my agent. So the next market I went to was Memphis. Phoenix had recovered so quickly that it was just no way to get in. It was over. It was over. So I went to Memphis. People were still at the auction house, and they were buying the properties. So those are called turnkeys. They exist in a small niche where the price is not so low that I can come in and take it, and not so high where they can repackage it and still sell it to me at a profit.
Okay.
So it's a very sweet spot where turnkeys operate. So a turnkey company, I researched, I approached the owner, I talked to them. They were exactly what I was looking for. They were also a property management company because they usually do both. I mean, they buy the property, they take care of it. It's easy. It's easy money. So I just started buying their product. They said they would find a house for 40 grand. They put 30 grand into it, change the AC, change the roof, paint, carpet, fix up the landscaping, put in 30 grand. Now they package it it's at 70 now, and they sell it for a profit at 90 to me. So they're getting a bit of profit. They're getting property management because I'll be using them.
Yeah.
And they get to keep everything in house. So that's what I did. I just started buying they were the gym. We got another one. I take it. Gym, I got another one. 100 grand. This is a 2,000 square foot. Take it. And then eventually that took off too. And then it was over. The game was over then.
Okay. So I have 2 questions from that what you just shared there. Was the first one being is, as a Canadian, how did you secure all the financing for, or did you just not finance anything for all these American properties?
So this goes back to what I talk about is the 3-bucket rule. Everyone needs to have a 3-bucket rule if they're interested in investing. If you're not interested in investing in real estate, you don't need the 3rd bucket. So the 2 buckets you definitely need are your low fee US index and your emergency fund. That's if you just want basic, retire comfortable, and you'll be good, right? So the first bucket, you're investing in a low fee US index regularly. You're finding an amount that you can contribute regularly for a long period of time.
Okay.
Emergency fund, you put in a high interest savings account, you put in regularly. Once you cover 6 to 12 months of your living expenses, caps out, and you put it aside and you keep going with that one. The 3rd bucket is for real estate. And this is what I was always interested in back in the 80s. So I had the 3rd bucket. The 3rd bucket is a storage fund. No one talks about the storage fund. I don't know why. The only people I've heard mention it are Warren Buffett and Grant Cardone. They mention it, but they mention it so fast in passing that people don't even pick it up.
Okay.
So Warren Buffett mentions it by saying, we always have dry powder to hunt for elephants. Where's this dry powder coming from? That's his storage account. He has money aside to take advantage of opportunities that inevitably come. Grant Cardone has a video about how to become a millionaire. And in there, he talks about a storage fund. You need to store your money. And he makes it very clear, we're not saving here. We're not looking to put this money away forever. We are storing it. So when we see something, we go, right? So he makes it very clear that that's what that is. And I came to the same conclusion back in the 80s. And I would have the third one, which was a storage fund. I would store because I knew my opportunity would come. It never came in 5, 10. It came after 20 years. And by then, my storage fund was ready to go. It was like, there's the opportunity I was storing for.
Yeah.
I got to go. So that's where it came from. And then because the credit crisis was so ginormous, it consumed all the funds from my storage fund. I sold my house. I was like, I need more money
for the opportunity.
I sold that down. And then my wife said, we should go and leverage ourselves. And that's where I drew the line. I was like, I can't, but I should have. My wife was right. I was wrong.
That's hilarious. Okay. So that's super valuable. I love that you mentioned those 3 buckets. Is there like a percentage rule of thumb that you would assign to those values, or like how do you determine how much to put in these places?
That's a fantastic question, because if the storage bucket gets too large, it becomes a drag on everything else.
Yeah.
So the cash is 6 to 12, the emergency. The investing is regular. The storage bucket, typically, I don't exceed 10% of my wealth.
Okay.
If it goes over 10%, what I'm thinking is I need to boost the contribution for my index. So for example, if my index was 500 a month, I would boost it to 550 just to keep it under 10%. Right?
Okay.
So then it doesn't become a drag. It's still a drag, but it's acceptable.
Okay. And so for these index funds, like, so do you literally pick one index fund that you're a fan of and just continue to contribute to that one index fund, or do you have a few different funds that you allocate to?
So that's a great question, because a lot of people like it simple, and I would prefer it simple too, but unfortunately it doesn't work that way. So if you think about how life works when you're working, let's say you pick an index fund. I like TD E series. So they have the TDB 902 and then 952. So that's an index fund. But then when you work, the companies that you work for say, oh, we have a third-party provider, which is Sun Life, and they have an index fund that's managed by BlackRock, and it does this. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm a BlackRock mutual fund guy now too.
Okay.
And then you work for another company, they're like, oh, we use Manulife so then you end up having mutual funds indexes all over the place. So, and I know you can consolidate them somehow, but I just haven't bothered.
Okay, so more so just achieving like that sort of reach through these funds.
Correct. So the whole purpose is you get the low fee US index.
Yeah.
Whether it's under one financial institution or 5,
doesn't matter.
Preferably 1, but
not a deal breaker. Okay, awesome. And the other question I had off of that whole story was, how did you figure out where the opportunity was? So obviously the first one was because your buddy had tipped you off to it, but then going forward, you said that you moved on to Memphis, and then I'm assuming that other places after that. Like, how did you figure out where the opportunities were?
That's a great question. And this is a lot of assumptions I made at the beginning and then research backed up later. So the assumptions I made were, number one, I didn't want a tourist location. Vegas to me, I know there's residents and people who live there, but I just didn't want a tourist spot. I knew I didn't want to be at the whim of the fickle tourists, which is coming back to save me during the virus crisis because all the Airbnbs are getting killed. So thank goodness I didn't go for that. Number two, I needed someplace. This sounded stupid, but because I invested 3,000 kilometers away, I was thinking, well, I don't want Hawaii because it's too far. I literally thought that. I was like, it's too far. It's like across like an ocean. Yeah. I mean, I'm okay going to Phoenix, but the ocean is just a little different.
That's a deal breaker. No more.
So that was dumb because my friend went to buy in Hawaii and he made a killing. But anyway, and so I was like, okay, so number two, I need a big city. I need a thriving economy, a big city, 1 million people or more. Phoenix was perfect. I needed someplace warm because I didn't want weather damage. Yeah. If there was snow, sleet, hail, I probably have to spend more on maintenance. And taking that to an extreme, I don't want hurricanes and tornadoes because my insurance would go up. So I got to cut out a whole bunch of the East Coast stuff with hurricanes and stuff that would like raise down my investments. So I was like, so it started narrowing down, moving over to the West. And then big cities in the West, you go to California, it's too expensive. Phoenix became that sweet spot where the price and all those other factors sort of fit.
Okay.
That's where I started. And Memphis was because I started researching. So that was just logic of narrowing things down.
Mm-hmm.
Memphis came because there's a couple of sites that are very useful if you want to research US real estate. Number one is Atom Data, ATTOM data, Atom Data. If you Google Atom Data, best rental yields, they give you an annual report every year where you find the best yields on single family homes in every county in the country.
Wow.
Number two is the Joint Center of Housing Studies from Harvard, JCHS from Harvard. They give you statistics about in-migration, people moving from one state to another, population growth, cost of living, everything you want to know about any place in the continental United States, about how people move and where they're finding jobs and how much money they're getting paid.
Wow.
And third is Redfin. Redfin actually has a research division that has all similar data. It's not as good as the first two, but it's a great place to start if you're starting from nowhere.
Okay, very cool. So then what I want to transition into now, thank you for dropping all those knowledge bombs. Really appreciate that. Is so what got you into social media? Like we talked about this a bit before the recording, but like what was the push that got you to actually start sharing all of your knowledge on social?
I always wanted to sort of provide the information that I learned, because back when I was a teenager, I was starved for that information.
Yeah.
I wanted help, and there was no one around to help me. There was no platform that I could use to help others. So I just left it. And I know YouTube came up and Facebook, but they were very cumbersome. I didn't want to film long videos and edit them down. People were blogging. I'm not someone who's going to sit there and type for hours. Like, I hate that. Like, you can see everything that I've designed around my life is based on simplicity. Like, I don't manage my properties. I don't take care of my stocks. I don't do anything. I just collect money. Like, that's all I do. And that's my goal. Like, some people have other goals. Like they like hustling. I don't like hustling. I wanted to replace everything. When I was younger, I was always bombarded by my relatives. What's your goal? What's your goal? You got this now. What's your goal? And eventually I got fed up of that question. And in my late teens, I said, you know what my goal is? My goal is to have no goals. No goals is my goal. And then they stopped asking me because I got fed up. But I designed my life that way so that my investments don't need me. They just run and I just collect checks. So when I got into social media, it had to be the same kind of platform. Blogging, that's a lot of work. Forget that. YouTube, oh no, it's okay. Podcasting, no offense to you, you're doing a fantastic job and you're really good at it. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. TikTok, I looked at this. My daughter, who's 8 years old, started looking at TikTok, and I looked at it. I said, what is this? So she taught me how to use it. So a lot of the features that you can see my evolution on TikTok. She taught me how to, look, you can put stickers, and you can put text, and you can.
That's awesome.
So she's teaching me all this stuff, and I'm like, wow, I can film something in less than a minute and just publish it right away. And editing is optional.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll do that. That's me.
That's Jim's social media.
Yeah, that's Jim's social media. So one time my daughter was at her bouldering class climbing, and I was sitting in the car, and you can see my earlier videos where it's all dark. I'm sitting in my car. I'm just waiting for my daughter to finish her lessons. And I'm like, I'm just going to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Jim. I'm an investor. I'm going to start throwing up some information on this platform. If you want to follow, great. If you don't, fantastic. And I started doing that. And now 700 videos later, after 5 months, I didn't know where it came from, honestly. And I don't know why I have 40,000 followers. So it just happened. And it wasn't because when I saw people before on Instagram, they're always gunning for followers. I didn't care about followers. Like, I don't care. Like, if 5 people follow me or 5,000 people follow me, I don't care.
Be the same.
I'm just dropping information. I'm good. Because I just wanted to help people where I was looking for help and no one was around. Like, TikTok became to other people, I hope, what books became to me. Books fed me. So I'm hoping TikTok could help feed someone who was in my position back then, who was like, I need this information, but no one around me knows. There's 37 million Canadians. in this country, this fantastic country. A little over 30 of them, 30 million, are adults. Out of the 30 million adults, only 1.3 are millionaires. And if you back that out, and that's about 5% of the population, if you back the home out of their net worth calculation, it's probably even lower, probably 3%. Yeah. So there's a high chance that your classmates, your coworkers, your relatives, your parents, your teachers have no idea about how money works, nor can they help you at all. You have no resources around you whatsoever that can help you. So that's one of the reasons I said, you're facing an uphill battle. At least I can make it balanced out a little bit.
That's awesome. So what's your handle across all social media for anybody who's listening to this who would want to go check you out?
So TikTok, my name is just Jim Chuong, first and last name combined. JimChuong. And it's first name, last name. And I think Instagram puts a dot in the middle, like Jim.Chuong.
Yeah.
And TikTok just puts it all in one. So if you just Google that, you'll find me there.
Perfect.
And that's
I'll link all that in the description box. So anybody who wants to go check them out, definitely go do that. And you also just recently released pre-orders for your ebook too, correct?
Yeah, I got that idea from, I can't remember the author. 4-hour work
week. Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss, yes.
Yeah.
So you'll notice that I make Mark Cuban always says, I think he has a saying where he says like fire, ready, aim.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always like that, fire, ready, aim. So I did that with real estate, there was stocks. You just go and then you figure it out later. So Tim Ferriss was like, push the book and then write it. So I'm writing.
Awesome.
So I pushed the book.
And you're accepting pre-orders, right?
Yes, I am accepting pre-orders right now. The book is fantastic. I've already written half of it. There's so much information I have. I've already written half of it. I didn't think I would be a writer, but the words are just coming, right? Because it's not based on something it's natural. It's sort of like what I've lived and the mistakes I've made and how you can avoid them and profit from them. So it doesn't take that much time. Or it's not much time as I thought. So yeah, order the book. It's a fantastic book. It'll come out in September.
Perfect. I'm definitely going to pre-order one myself personally. So I only have a few more questions here, and then I'll let you get back to your busy day. So the first thing I have to say is, so like when you get asked about what you do for a living, how do you field that question?
Yeah, that's challenging. I just say that I'm an investor in U.S. stocks and U.S. real estate. Sorry, I'm just turning something on here.
No worries.
Yeah, here you go. There's just those two for now. So I'm an investor in U.S. stocks and U.S. real estate. What I do is I educate people who are interested in those two areas. So right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm educating people who are interested about doing what I did and not following the plan of working for 60 years before they can start enjoying their money. Okay. I mean, it sounds simple, but that's what it is.
Okay, awesome. So the other question I have for you is, if someone's listening to this right now, let's say hypothetically they're 25 years old and they've done nothing in the way of investing, where would you tell them to start?
So definitely education is number one, even before the 3 buckets, because the problem is if you start investing without having an understanding of what you're dealing with, the market crashes, you get scared, you burn all your money, and then you go nowhere. Okay. So you really have to start reading. So I would strongly recommend either following my TikTok channel or listening to podcasts, because the information is at a level where you can understand, you can consume the content, right? Yeah. Don't go to the library. I went there, don't understand anything. All those Barron's, Wall Street journals, and those huge tomes about bonds and those are very hard to understand. They're very technical. They're written for economists, Nobel Prize winning. Don't even bother there. Go to the bookstore. I know that's antiquated, that's old school.
Yeah.
Podcast. I still learn from podcasts. I listen to podcasts all the time.
Yeah.
And I watch YouTube all the time. And I'm always learning. So you're always learning. Pick an area. I would recommend picking the stock market.
Okay.
I would cut out all the short-term stuff, right? Cut out all the information about short-term stuff. Cut out all the stuff about options and focus on long-term investing. John Bogle, a little book on common sense investing, is a fantastic place to start.
Yep.
Right? I'm sure you've read it.
Yeah, I got it right here. That's why I say that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. And then listen to podcasts that promote a long-term investing lifestyle and go from there. And then once you get comfortable, then start with the 3 buckets that I talked about.
Okay.
After you're 25, you learned a bit, start with the 3 buckets. It should take about a year. And then if you read consistently, and then you can get started.
Okay, awesome. So after hearing that, what are some podcasts that you recommend? And then I have another specific question for you after you name a few good recommendations there.
So the podcast I love Grant Cardone's podcast. He has like 3 of them.
Okay.
I think he has Young Hustlers, he has Real Estate Investing, and he has a third one, which I don't listen to as much. The Real Estate Investing, I'm very interested in. I listen to that. And I actually listen to those 2 the most.
Okay.
So by far.
Okay. And then the other question I had is it's actually one that I had to try to answer myself because a friend asked me, because I'm nowhere near as intelligent when it comes to investing as you are, but I get a lot of those questions from my friend group. And so he asked, well, I want to save for a down payment on a home, but I also want to invest. What should I do with my money? How would you answer that question?
That's a really hard question, and that's a really good question. And this is how I would answer it. So first, a lot of concern comes from not understanding or getting wrong lessons from your schools and your teachers and your parents, right? Number 1, shelter is never an investment, ever. Shelter is never an investment. Shelter is an expense. I don't care about renting or owning. I don't care if you rent or if you own it. It will be an expense and it will eat your budget monthly, guaranteed. Number 2, there's an easy way to decide if you want to rent or own. To me, it's very easy, and it's not based on math. So everyone's breathing a sigh of relief. That's great. It's not based on math. You basically look at the 2 extremes. Let's look at the credit crisis as one extreme. Houses were 50 grand. What should you do? Probably buy. It's a no-brainer. You can buy something for 50, rent it out for 900. You're going to be making money like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
On the other end of the spectrum, because going back to the credit crisis, you can pay off the house, the entire house, in less than 7 years. Like just pay it right off.
Mm-hmm.
On the other end of the spectrum, if you live in an area where if you rented it, it would take you 50, 30, 40, 50 years to pay it off, probably shouldn't buy.
Okay.
Right? Those are the 2 extremes. Definitely buy, probably shouldn't buy. Most of the time we live in the middle, where it's kind of like 20 times. You can pay off the house if you rent it off and have someone rent there for 20 to 25 years.
Okay.
In that situation, you have to add up all the costs of owning a home and make sure it falls below 30% of your gross take. If you make 99 grand a year, all your expenses, insurance, maintenance, property tax, capital expenditures for windows, air conditioning, roof, should fall below 33,000 a year. The CMHC uses that criteria for considering you to be housing stressed or not housing stressed.
Okay.
So and I would even lower it. I would say 25% if you want to be safe. So take up all your expenses for owning a home and get that number down. See how much you make. And if that's not less than 33% or 30%, and in my case, I would go for 25, you probably should rent.
Okay.
Because at that point, you're stressing yourself out and burning your money at the same time.
Okay. So then you'd advise to rent and then invest any sort of extra money that you would have into index funds and things of that nature?
Correct. But again, if you don't have the knowledge to invest, let's say you decide to rent, but you don't have any investing knowledge, you'll probably do bad at both ends because your investing won't do well for you, and then you're renting and not going anywhere. So you need to study first, then invest. But then keep evaluating that criteria. If you want to start a family and you can make that number work now that you are double income, or you got a raise and you can make that 30% number work, then you transition while you invest. You just want to keep that flow into that investment account going. You just don't want to stop it. That's all. That's all you're trying to do. Just not stopping it.
Okay, that makes sense. So obviously education is paramount and then adjust accordingly from there.
based on your life circumstance, how much money you're getting paid, and that kind of stuff.
Perfect. Okay, so I have my one final question left for you today, and that is, we're having a dinner party. There's gonna be 5 people in attendance. 2 of them are me and you, and then you get to invite the other 3. They can be anyone dead or alive. And then what are we
Yeah.
having as the main course, and what's dessert?
That's a fantastic question. Outside of investing, I love Alan Watts. I don't know if you know who Alan Watts is.
Yeah.
He is someone who has really helped me understand Eastern philosophy very well. So very spiritual that way. So Alan Watts, I listen to his YouTube channel, like anything on YouTube that he talks about, I listen to it.
Okay.
I've also read some of his work. So Alan Watts would be one for sure. Number 2, number 2 and 3 are very difficult because, to be honest, a lot of the people who are alive, they're on social media. I learn a lot from them just by watching them right there. I don't really need to have them for dinner. It's sort of like when I watch a YouTube video with Grant Cardone, it's like he's like right there telling me what to do anyway, or Robert Kiyosaki.
Mm.
So I would probably want my mom. She passed away.
Okay.
She would be number 2 for sure,
Awesome.
if not number 1.
Yeah.
And number 3, that's a tough call. Maybe my wife's mom, who also passed away.
I thought they're a good group. And then what are we having for dinner?
Oh, wow, that's going to be tough because since my mom passed away, I turned vegetarian. So she's going to be like, "What? You don't eat this stuff anymore?" So I would probably have one of those. It's like this. It looks like a burger, but it's like mushroom. It's like a giant mushroom burger.
Okay.
I'd have one of those.
Awesome.
Yeah, shiitake mushroom burger. Is that what it is?
I think so.
That's amazing. I love those.
What's for dessert?
Dessert is definitely ice cream cake by DQ, strawberry, and whatever that cookie dough thing they put in there is. That's insane. That's stuff I could just eat that.
Yeah, I love that stuff too. That's awesome. All right, Jim. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. Everyone who's listening to this, be sure to go check him out and then go pre-order his ebook. I cannot wait to read that myself personally. So once again, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Take care.